For nearly 10 years, I treated my vacant plot like an investment for the future. I wasn't ready to build immediately, but I knew the area was growing and property values were increasing. The plot sat at the end of a quiet road and had a beautiful view of the surrounding countryside. I visited several times a year, paid every property tax bill on time, kept the grass under control, and maintained the small boundary fence. I had no reason to believe anyone could challenge my ownership. Then one Saturday morning, I drove to the property and saw a brand new fence stretching across the front of my land. At first, I assumed someone had made a mistake. Then I saw construction materials stacked inside the fence. A pile of gravel, several wooden posts, a small storage shed, and a sign identifying the neighboring homeowner as the owner of the property. I walked over and knocked on his door. He came outside and seemed surprised to see me. I asked him why he had fenced my land. He told me it wasn't my land anymore. I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. He wasn't. He said the HOA had confirmed that the vacant parcel was actually community property and had approved its transfer to him. I immediately called the HOA. The board president answered. I asked whether the HOA had sold my property. She told me the association had resolved the ownership issue. I asked what that meant. She explained that because I had not developed the lot for several years, the HOA believed the parcel had been abandoned. I reminded her that I had paid property taxes every year. She said that didn't necessarily prove active use. I asked where the legal authority came from. She said the HOA had a survey. They emailed it to me. The map showed my plot inside a larger area labeled as community property. I stared at the document for several minutes. I knew the map was wrong. I had purchased the property based on a professional survey. I still had a copy. I contacted the surveyor who had originally worked on the transaction, but he had retired. His company had closed years earlier. So I hired a new licensed surveyor and gave him every document I had. He told me something that immediately caught my attention. Your deed references an original monument. I asked what that meant. He explained that old property boundaries were sometimes established using physical markers, such as iron rods, stone monuments, trees, pipes, or other surveyed reference points. If the original marker could still be found, it could help reconstruct the historical boundary. He spent the first day searching. Nothing. The second day, he expanded the search. Still nothing. On the third day, he called me. Come to the property. When I arrived, he was standing beside an old tree near the back corner of the parcel. He had uncovered a small metal marker buried beneath several inches of soil. He showed me the identification stamped into it. It matched the historical survey description. That tiny marker changed everything. The surveyor used the marker to reconstruct the original boundary lines. The result was undeniable. The entire plot was mine. The HOA's map had placed the boundary several yards away from its actual historical location. The neighbor's new fence was inside my property. The shed was inside my property. The land the HOA had supposedly transferred was mine. My attorney sent a formal demand to both the neighbor and HOA. The HOA responded by claiming that the surveyor's interpretation was incorrect. So we obtained the original county survey records. They matched my survey. Then we obtained the title history. That matched too. There was no transfer from me to the HOA. There was no transfer from the HOA to the neighbor because the HOA had never owned the property in the first place. The neighbor was caught in the middle. He eventually admitted that he had relied entirely on the HOA's representation. He had paid the HOA a fee for the supposed transfer and had spent money installing the fence. I felt bad for him because he had clearly been misled. But that didn't change the fact that the land belonged to me. The case went before a judge. The HOA argued that the plot had effectively been abandoned. The judge asked whether an owner who continued paying taxes and maintaining a property could simply lose ownership because the land remained vacant. The HOA's attorney struggled to answer. Then the judge asked for the document transferring the property. There wasn't one. The court ruled that the HOA had no authority to transfer the parcel. The fence had to be removed. The shed had to be moved. The HOA was prohibited from representing itself as the owner. But the most interesting discovery came afterward. Several homeowners began checking their own property boundaries. The HOA had apparently been relying on the same outdated map for years. One homeowner discovered that a portion of his driveway was actually outside the HOA's claimed boundary. Another found that the HOA had incorrectly placed a community easement on private property. Suddenly, my little vacant plot had uncovered a much larger problem. The HOA had trusted a map more than the actual deeds. And the reason they were exposed was incredibly simple. A surveyor found a small metal marker buried under the dirt. For years, people had walked over that marker without knowing what it meant. But when the HOA tried to take my land, that forgotten piece of metal became the strongest evidence in the entire case. I eventually kept the marker uncovered and protected. Not because I needed it anymore, but because every time I look at it, I remember how close my property came to being transferred away by people who never owned it.